So Heather's just waiting. We're just getting things ready and set up. So
Okay, I think you guys aren't for a little way in. Do you want me to wait a second, or do you think you guys will be ready by the time we get to you?
do you want Brian to wait or?
No, I feel like I'm waiting.
She said. Did you hear her?
I think she said to go ahead. Was that okay? All right.
Okay, and yes, the class that we'll be offering will be a master's level for credit class.
That's cool.
Karen and Karen. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm sitting here on the couch too, just watching March Madness. Keeping up with girls basketball right now.
Okay, here we go. Hit and go live now.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is Casey Church. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, welcoming you to another night with a good medicine way. So tonight we have a special speaker, one of our own. Brian is going to be giving our message tonight, and look forward to his words and his insights. So I'm going to open us up with a prayer. It's called the Prayer of the Seven Directions. If we were all in a room and we were standing and facing, we could face the directions as we were doing this prayer. So it's meant for that. It says, begin by facing east. So this is where the sun comes up. So the direction of the new beginning, hope, promise, and potential. Prayer that may be open to receive the gifts of this day. Each turn is a quarter turn to the right. So I wouldn't say that as a prayer, but we would turn to quarter turn to the right. To the south. This is the direction of warmth, growth, fertility, also known as creativity and productivity. In addition, the direction represents faith, trust, and faithfulness in relationships. Prayer for these things this day. Turn to the west. This is the direction where the sun goes down. This is the direction of rest, of our dreams, lives, of our closure and ending of the day. It's the beginning of a new prayer for these things this day. Turn to the north. This is the direction of the cold, of wind, of strength, of courage, of fortitude, might, single-mindedness, focus, clarity, and purpose. Pray for these things this day. Turn back to the east and turn upward. For Native Americans, this is the direction of the Father Sky. Pray that your heart, mind, soul, and spirit will not forget to look upward this day to the one who is the most greatest of them all. Turn downward and touch the earth. Pray that everything that you do this day will honor the reverence of the earth. Turn inward. Place your hands on your heart and pray that all that you do this day will be true to the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Christ, Holy Spirit who dwells within you. This is the prayer of the seven directions. So maybe I'll post that and share that with you guys so that you can see that. So with that, we turn it over and we begin our time with the Witherows, Women's History Month. Heather.
Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to be with you. We have been celebrating Women's History Month, and so I'd like to give you guys a little bit of a history about why March. Why is it happening in March? Well, we celebrate Women's History Month in March to remind ourselves of the accomplishments of women throughout the years to our culture and society. From health and science to politics, from education to the arts, Women's History Month is an opportunity to reflect on the trailblazing women who led the way for significant change. But why is the month of March designated as Women's History Month? I didn't know. I've been out of the country for 15 years, so I was kind of interested to find that out. Well, significant events happened in history specifically related to the women's rights movement in the month of March. International Women's Day is celebrated on March 8th. It was established as a holiday in 1911. The first major march on Washington by suffragettes occurred on March 3rd, 1913. The National Women's Party was formed in March 1917, and the group was dedicated to getting women the right to vote. Title IX was passed on March 1st, 1972. Title IX, as you probably know, is the federal civil rights law that was passed to prohibit sex-based discrimination in any school or other education program that receives federal money. In fact, the first ever Women's History Week was created in March to rally support for Title IX. And the Equal Rights Amendment passed in the United States Senate on March 22nd, 1972. Now, as I listed these dates, I did not mention the names of leaders like Alice Paul or Lucy Burns, who choreographed the Women's March on Washington on March 3rd, 1913, where thousands of women gathered the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration to march for voting rights. Ms. Burns and Ms. Paul would later establish the National Women's Party in 1917 in March. Nor did I share that Edith Green, U.S. House of Representatives for Oregon, spearheaded the legislation that would lead to the passing of Title IX in March. And I didn't mention U.S. House of Representatives Martha W. Griffiths. She's from Michigan, and she became known as the mother of the ERA. Though introduced in every session from 1923 to 1970, the Equal Rights Amendment became trapped every single time in the House Judiciary Committee. But Representative Martha Griffiths filed a discharge petition, securing signatures by the House majority to get the resolution out from under that trap and onto the floor, where it finally passed. And then the Senate thereafter in March. Now, in support of all these trailblazing women, behind all of these significant accomplishments were the thousands and thousands of women we do not know and will never know. These are the women who marched. These are the women who prayed. These are the women who rallied. These are the women who petitioned. And these are the women who sacrificed. The women who worked behind the scenes year after year after year. We don't know them. Yet the reason we have a Women's History Month is because of them. These movements were born and these laws were passed because of their efforts, their perseverance, and their sacrifices, and their belief that these rights, these justices, these opportunities were deserved. And so this month, March 2021, we recognize and honor all, the famous women and the inconspicuous and the hidden women. All are important and all contributed to continue to contribute, to the causes of equality, social justice, and opportunity we seek for Native American women today. May it be so.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Okay, we're going to move into a couple songs here to get us going. We're going to do, these are both Jonathan Miracle songs. We're going to do Ganaronkwa, which is sometimes known as the Good Medicine song, even though Ganaronkwa means I love you in Mohawk. So basically what you're singing through the song is Jesus, I love you. And part of the reason why we love him is because he's good medicine for us. And then we're also going to sing We Are One right after that. And let me get the screen share going so you guys can see the words, so you can sing along in your own space.
I see you dancing behind your names.
Yo,
to This Week in Native American History. You probably noticed that in the United States, Deb Haaland was sworn in as the first Native American member of the U.S. Cabinet, and she was sworn in by the first female Vice President of the United States, also a woman of color, which is the dawning of great things. I think just to be able to hear from not just the male viewpoint, but the female as well, I pray will really beginning a time of richness. So that, another thing about Deb Haaland's regalia she wore a traditional ribbon skirt, with the corn stalk, the butterfly, the dragonfly earrings made by an indigenous friend, and her moccasins. She was really representing, and the woman who made her traditional ribbon dress for Deb said it was deeply moving just to watch her in it, just to the feeling of being seen, just the native presence there, and not cloaked, not concealed, but being seen. And this reminds me again of Heather Wither when she talks about the the Zulu way to say, just the greeting is I see you. So good stuff, really good stuff. And now for Preston.
Hi everyone. Just had to find my Elohe on this phone. So this week's reading is today's reading is kind of pretty interesting. It's titled "The Return of Solomon." March 22nd. Jubilee was a good news for the poor. Sabbath, and especially Jubilee, the waiting opportunities for a new start among marginalized people. Their special, the acceptable year of the Lord was the chance and oppressed needed in order to find new hope. Paradoxically, while the year of Jubilee was good news to the poor, it might have felt bad news to rich and the prosperous. Jubilee was good news to the oppressed because bad news to the oppressor. Certainly Mary, the mother of Jesus, understood the implications that the announcement of her pregnancy when she sung in Luke 1:51 to 53. His mighty arms has done tremendous things. He has gathered the proud and hearty ones. He has brought down and prince them from their thrones and exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry and good things and sent the rich away among the empty-handed. Mary, during Jesus' time, understood well in the radical implications of Jubilee year. Why are such radical social measures created? According to Isaiah 61, was because God loved justice and God hated robbery and wrongdoings. God's will in cosmic design is that no one suffers unjustly, but because human beings created unjust systems, shalom type social parameters must serve as a social safety net to offset human disobedience. In order to create a shalom system of social harmony, no person could be oppressed for too long without hope of ease and eventually realize no family can remain in poverty for generations. No land can be worked until it was depleted and useless. No animal will go hungry for too long. None of these and validations of shalom that were left unmarginalized for too long would upset the natural order of reciprocity and fixed by all creations. It so brings tingles. It makes me think of like all things will be fixed, and he knows that we'll be on the right path. Even when we need to stir up things, we need to show that stirring up is right. It can be scary that we are stirring up things, but at the same time, it's for the good. If anyone else has anything to say, I would like to give it off to John Witherwill for the reading.
Well, following up on what Leo was saying about the greeting in Zulu, I just want to say, I'm Sanibonani, Bazawani. It's literally, it means, I see you all, my brothers and sisters. As we read the Creator's Word. Tonight, we're going to be reading First Nations version. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 through 29. Some who walk this wide road represent themselves as sheep, but inside they are hungry wolves. Watch out for these false prophets. You will know them by their fruit. Do grapes come from a thorn bush or pears from thistles? Will a sick tree give good fruit or a healthy tree bad fruit? No. Healthy trees give good fruit and sick trees give bad fruit. It is the trees with bad fruit that are cut down and used to make a fire. When you see the fruit of their ways, you will know them. Not everyone who calls me their great chief is walking the good road from the world above. The ones who do what my Father from the world above wants are the ones walking this road. On that day, the time when Creator reveals all hearts, many will say to me, "O great chief, did we not speak for you, force out evil spirits and do great things, all in your name, representing you?" But this is what I will have to say to them. Who are you? Go away from me, you who do what you know is wrong, for you never truly knew me. The ones who listen to me and walk in my ways are like a wise man who built a grand lodge on solid ground. The rain poured down, the streams flowed, and the strong winds came. They all beat against the lodge, but it stood strong against the storm. Nothing could shake it, for it was built on solid ground. The ones who hear my words but do not walk in these ways are like another man, a foolish one, who built his lodge on top of the sand. When the storm came against it, the lodge crashed to the ground and all that was in it was lost. Creator sets free. Jesus was finished for the day with his teaching and wise stories. All the people were amazed and had great respect for him, for he was not like the other spiritual leaders, the scroll keepers. He spoke with true wisdom and dignity, showing he had the right to represent the Great Spirit. The Creator's words.
All right. And do you have a prayer for us, Casey, as we get digging into the content here?
Yes, I did. Father, thank you for this time together. We pray that your blessing and your wisdom guide Brian as he gives us a word this evening. Open our minds to his perspective, the words that he says and shares with us this evening, we pray. Thank you also for everyone who joined us tonight as we listen in. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. All right. So give me a second here to get everything set up so I can make sure that I can still click everything as I need to. Okay. And then let me share the screen. One thing while I'm getting this all together that I discovered today is that if you go to firstnationsversion.net, you can actually get the Sermon on the Mount. He has it there for a PDF of it for free digital download. So today, we're looking at Walking the Good Path with Creator Sets Free, learning from the long talk on the big hill that most white folks know as the Sermon on the Mount, and that Terry Wildman calls Wisdom from a Mountainside. So just looking at the section that we just read today, so this is Creator Sets Free is wrapping up his long talk. So this is kind of like his, his summary and conclusion of his long talk. So the key points that I took from what we just heard today is, watch out for tricksters and liars, because many that say they're on the good road, but they go their own way, and they do not have a Creator's heart about what they're doing. And you can see their heart by what their lives produce. The scriptures say, you can see them by their fruit. So you know that we do. And then relationship with Creator is what is important. Remember when the people were saying, God, we did all these great things for you. And Creator says, I never knew you. So relationship with Creator is what's important. And then Creator Sets Free wrapped it up with walk in my ways, that those who love me will do what I say. If you are wise, if you not only listen to these words but put them into practice. But what words was Creator Sets Free talking about? We don't get it right there in that section that we read, but as he was wrapping up his whole section on the long talk on the big hill, we can look back over the whole teaching that Creator Sets Free gave and see what there is to find. So I went through the First Nations version of it, and I kind of distilled out the main points that I felt like were there, and we can just run down this bullet list real quick, and then we'll have some question and answer time at the end. So if something in this list you're like, wait, how did he get that? I don't remember that being in the long talk on the big hill. Then we can we can talk about it then. But this is what I felt like was there. So walking away that is bringing cleansing and healing. So this is the way we conduct ourselves in the world. That we're not bringing chaos and destruction, but we're bringing cleansing and healing. Be respectful in your relationships, and that's all your relationships, with people, with animals, with nature, with spiritual beings, all your relationships. Be respectful in your relationships. Be a bringer of peace and work through conflicts in dignity. I think a lot of times people think about being a peacemaker as being passive, and that's not at all what it's about. But to bring peace, you have to know how to address conflicts and how to engage people with different points of view in a way that has a better chance of bringing people together, rather than driving them apart. And then I found, and this one is this is kind of extrapolated because he talks a lot about, most people think of this section that I got this from as about kind of your personal lust and your personal purity. But really, when you think about the position that women had in the culture when Jesus spoke this, he's really talking about honoring the outcast and the disenfranchised. And that is a common theme through all the Gospels. So I think that it really fits in that place too. But then along with that goes walk in gentleness and honor and respect in intimate relationships. Those intimate family relationships should not be about taking advantage of one another or trying to get something for our own selfish gain. But in gentleness and honor and respect, then our families will be healthy and will reflect God's ideals. Have integrity and truthfulness in your speaking. Be straightforward. He makes a big deal later when he talks about prayer, about don't throw out a bunch of words. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. So have integrity and truthfulness in your speaking. Do not walk in violence. Find another path. He even tells us that we should love our enemies and do good to those who do wrong to us. And that goes with the next one where it says, be merciful and kind, even when treated badly. That doesn't mean that you let people walk all over you or that you don't call out injustice when you see it, but you do it in a way that is merciful and kind. And again, that is about being a bringer of peace and working through conflicts with dignity. So it's those all kind of fit together. And along with that, walk in humility. Don't be a show-off. A lot of these things, if you're coming from a more self-oriented point of view, you want, to kind of blow your trumpets and shout it from the rooftops. Oh, look how merciful and kind I'm being, look how I'm, taking the high road, and whatever, and be humble. Don't be a show-off. Humility is usually the best path to resolve conflict and to bring reconciliation and to bring restoration. Humility is very powerful. And so don't undercut humility by showing off or, trying to take undue credit. Be helpful whenever you're able. He comes around to that a lot, about how we treat others and whether we know them closely or not. But that if we have opportunity, we should be helpful if we can. Walk in honesty, especially in your relationship with Creator. That's honesty about who you are. That's honesty about where you are. That's honesty about what you would be without your relationship with Creator. That's honesty and about what your relationship with Creator empowers you to be. So there's a lot in that, but honesty, we can't really deal with any conflicts or problems in life if we're not honest about what's going on, what's gone on, and what could happen. And lift your voice to the Great Spirit with honesty, simplicity, and humility. This is where he's talking a lot about that, people pray with all kinds of words and show and flashiness. And this also gets back, to relationship with Creator. Just speak to the Great Spirit honestly. Let God know what you're going through. Let God know what you're struggling with. Let God know your hopes and dreams, your frustrations. But do it in humility and be ready maybe for some hard direction from the Great Spirit. Because a lot of time, great change comes with great effort. And so it's not always an easy answer that we're getting. But Creator never said things would be easy. He said things would be good. Walk in generosity and dance your prayers. This specifically comes from how Terry Wildman treated one section where instead of the ask, seek, and knock, he reinterpreted that as dancing your prayers. And I think what he's getting at is in what you do, realize that your actions are a prayer. That what you do in life is a living and breathing prayer. So prayer is not just our words, but it's our actions as well. And with that in mind, we should walk in generosity and not be selfish. Rather than a possessor, be a caretaker. Don't be concerned about money, possessions, your well-being so much. Be more concerned about being a caretaker. Being in good relationship with the things that are in your life, not hoarding them and possessing them. And part of how you can do that is to trust in Creator's goodness and avoid worrying. Those really go hand in hand. And when you are in a place to give instruction, be a gracious teacher and be wise in your relationships. Sometimes it's not the time to try to instruct somebody. And that's when in the long talk, Creator Sets Free talked about it. Don't cast your sacred things in front of the pigs. Because they're just going to trample them and then turn on you. So be wise and gracious in how you teach and how you share your wisdom and your experience. And then finally, walk in a good way, even if no one else is. Sometimes our path is very narrow, and sometimes it seems like there's not a lot of people on it, but we do good because it is good. So walk in a good way, even if no one else is. And then Creator Sets Free really summed it up in that famous scripture that also comes from Jewish traditions. And I kind of reformulated it a little bit here, just so we might think about it in a different way, and it might strike us different. So walk in loving relationship with Creator through everything you feel, everything you think, and everything you do. And in the same manner, walk in a good way in all relationships, being first to do what is right as you wish others to be with you. So that's the general idea of what Creator Sets Free addressed in his long talk on the Big Hill. But we're a multicultural group here. So what about my culture? How does my cultural understanding and my cultural history fit into what Creator Sets Free is instructing us to do? And for a little bit, I'm going to reach back to Richard Twiss. He had a lot of wise things to say about this. I'm just going to read this quote straight through, so please forgive that. But so Richard said, Native people have a rich spiritual and cultural heritage. It is into this reality that Creator sent his Son. This was done in order to make a way for all people to once again travel the path of beauty and harmony that God the Father intended all of his children to live in, walk in, through Jesus Christ, the Waymaker. There is no biblical basis that would allow us to disengage from one another or disregard our need for one another. Unless all the various parts that God designed to make up the whole are intact and functioning, there is dysfunction. Each and every part must be connected and engaged, or there is no possible way for the whole to function fully and according to God's design and best plan. Without our native brethren, the church only makes do. We limp along less than we are meant to be. So then I also put together this little comparison here, and I don't do this to try to demonize somebody or to say that one culture is better than another, but in understanding how we approach what Creator Sets Free told us, historically, the European colonial cultures have insisted that they had the right answers and that other cultures were inferior. So this is not an exhaustive list in any way, but this is what does the culture emphasize. Colonial culture tends to emphasize rugged individualism, making your own way, independence. Colonial culture is very much about freedoms of individuals, and making your own way, being responsible. It's very oriented around property and wealth as a sign that you're doing things the right way. If you're doing things the right way, you're prosperous, you have enough wealth. That's kind of the gauge by which how you're doing in society is measured. Colonial culture talks a lot about exceptionalism, being the one that gets ahead, making your stamp in the world, making a name for yourself, standing above the rest. And colonial culture is very much about production, about progress, about improving things, about making new things, and about reaching for that next thing. And again, these things aren't necessarily good or bad. This is just what the cultures emphasize. Indigenous cultures, on the other hand, tend to emphasize family and relationships. There's more emphasis about kie, about helping each other, about being in good relationship with each other, about looking out for someone when they're struggling, and not insisting that they do it on their own, but being willing to reach out and help. Family and relationships are very important in Indigenous culture, and as an extension from that, Indigenous cultures are much more focused on community rather than independence. How does this affect the whole community? Not just how does this affect me individually, but how does this affect all my relations? How does what I do impact those around me? There's much more emphasis on that in Indigenous culture. Indigenous culture is much more about caretaking than it is about, and that's not stewardship. Stewardship really comes from more the rubric of thinking about property, that you steward your property, you be a good steward of your stuff. Caretaking is more relational. Caretaking is about making sure that I'm not existing in a way that negatively impacts somebody else or something else. That we have a healthy symbiotic relationship going on, that no one is suffering or being taken down for the sake of others rising up, that we're all looking out for each other. And again, with that is cooperation is emphasized over like exceptionalism. Rather than making a name for yourself, it's really about how do we as a community get along together? How do we work together to make things better for everybody? And there's not really this emphasis on an individual standing out as a leader or as like the big, role model. Rather, it's much more cooperative. And then rather than production, Indigenous culture has much more emphasis on preservation. And that kind of goes with the caretaking. Rather than using a resource to produce something, Indigenous culture is much more concerned with preserving that resource, because it's not just seen as a resource, it's seen as something you have relationship with in creation. So Indigenous culture is much more concerned about preservation. So those are kind of differences in what the cultures emphasize. As with anything, there's positives and negatives that go with each of those things. You could go through and take anything and you could list a bunch of positive things about it from either side, and you could list negative things about it as well. So it's, again, this isn't like a value comparison. This is just a cultural comparison. I'm not trying to say that one is better than the other, just that they're different. And this is what they tend to emphasize. Expanding from that, Randy Woodley, and this comes partially from his book on Shalom in the Community of Creation. But this is specifically taken from an article he wrote for Sojourners called The Fullness Thereof. And so he offers a worldview that is fundamentally both indigenous and biblical. And again, I bring this out because so much of the time missionary culture told Native people that their culture was inherently unbiblical and unscriptural. So Randy brought out some points about how indigenous culture lines up with scriptural principles. And so he has creation exists because of a creator. Life is intrinsically valuable because it is a gift from creator, and therefore it is sacred, meaning that sacred purpose is crucial to our existence. And that's a concept that really runs through a lot of Jewish thinking, that life is sacred because life is from creator. So there's a lot of that. Jumping up to the right there, the role of human beings is unique, and humans relate to the rest of creation uniquely. Again, this gets back to like preservation and caretaking ideas. This includes restoring harmony through gratitude, reciprocity, and ceremony between creator, humans, and all other parts of creation. So again, this is understanding all those connections and relationships. Again, that emphasis on relationship. And then he says, harmony is not simply understood as a philosophical idea. It is about how life operates. And the only way that abundant life can continue is if life is to be lived as the Creator intends. And again, with that, we could, go back, to these principles that Creator sets free, revealed in the long talk. So thinking about all that kind of stuff. So take a moment to reflect. How will I walk in harmony and beauty on the good road? How will I apply the teachings that Creator Sets Free gave us in the long talk on the big hill? So before we get into question and answer time, I want to give everybody a chance just to ponder and reflect on that a little bit. And I'm just going to play a little bit of Native American flute music to kind of fill the space. And while we're thinking about that, this is also the mount that I picked here is Disney. How do you say it?
Now Dishley.
Thank you. Needed my Navajo personal scholar there. Can you say that one more time?
It's now Dishley.
Yeah, and this is a sacred mountain for the Dene people. It's kind of the center mountain, kind of the hub around which everything else revolves. And we lived out there very near it for a couple years. So anyway, a little time to pause and reflect.
Can you put the your distillation of the Sermon on the Mount page back up there? Or did someone have a chat also?
Oh, well, I took that down, but we can talk about it. So yeah, any questions, comments? you liked what I said, you think I'm out to lunch, all perspectives are welcome to be put on the table. So we can, I certainly don't suggest that I have any kind of special angle on the teachings of Creator Sets Free. I'm just someone who loves him and is trying my best to do things the way he would want us to do them.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. That was a very good presentation that you did there. Really, I love your thought pattern and the way that you understand harmony and shalom. Randy is a great resource for, so knowledgeable about many things, and a good one to listen to. It seems so many of the thoughts that you shared in there have such a grounding, not only in the Hebrew way of thinking, but also native way of thinking. It really gets me sometimes that throughout history, how people did not live by almost any of those ways of looking, and that they could claim to be superior to other cultures around the world, to make edicts that say, okay, we are so exceptional that the rest of the people around the world are not even human. So we said it, so it must be. How arrogant to think that could be, and that the people around the world didn't know what they were saying. They had no idea that, oh, they're going to be here and they can take our culture and they can change us and slave us. That your thinking is very grounded in a biblical way of understanding and a native way of understanding. It's very unique. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Or
Okay, there you go.
I did have a comment. Oh, you want to go first, Lamar? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Brian. And in light of your presentation, I think that it's interesting to point out that here in Native culture, quite reverse from mainstream, Western culture, American culture. Like for example, we have been taught to believe that the leader of a people is the one that should be treated the best and be given such high regard and respect and gifting and so forth. But within indigenous culture, like the chief, for example, the chief is the one that would not rest until everyone else is taken care of. But in the mainstream culture, it's quite reversed. Is that we must all give such honor and respect and reverence to our leader. But the chief is the one who gives so much respect and caretaking, as you say, to everyone else. Like, you notice how the chief or the king, like the king or the president is always the wealthiest in much mainstream culture. Well, usually within tribal culture, no, the king is the one who's not the wealthiest, but wants to make sure that everyone else has wealth and has taken care of. And then also another interesting factor from indigenous culture, and this is something that I learned from Casey Pops, is that, and even Brian Brightcloud, who's also a dear friend of ours, Brian Brightcloud, is that when someone is being honored within mainstream culture, when someone is being honored, he or she is often given gifts or being recognized, receiving some type of recognition. Whereas within tribal cultures, is that it's the other way around. When in the tribal culture, if someone's being honored, instead of receiving, they give out. They give the gifts. Because the idea is sharing the honor with somebody, sharing the greatness with someone else. That's what's greatly important. Like, I've been involved with Casey numerous times where the family was being honored, but instead what we did was we gave gifts to everyone else that was there. And so I take all that into consideration, and then I really try to think about, really, and this is a long-standing statement, what would Jesus do? You know, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, what did Jesus do? Instead of living a life of wealth and of royalty, because he is of a royal line, being a descendant of David, he lived as the common man, you know, of not great wealth. And he was the type that would lay down his life for others, making sure that everyone else was taken care of, like the feeding of the 5,000, healing the sick, and you know, everything that was quite selfless. You know, Jesus followed that great example, and just imagine how much better we could be as a body of believers if we were willing to take that approach and to learn of some of the practices that is exemplified within indigenous culture. And if we took that and we applied that, going away from mainstream culture that we have been taught to believe, a mainstream culture that has a long-standing history of oppressing another culture, another group of people. So
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I mean, and Jesus, creator sets free, himself said, the greatest among you should be the servant of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he put it right out there. And again, that's kind of that difference between, you know, the individualism and exceptionalism on the colonial side and the relationship and the caretaking on the indigenous side. And again, I'm not trying to say that like colonial culture is inherently evil, but colonial culture emphasizes certain attributes and indigenous culture emphasizes certain attributes. And I think, as Richard Twist said in that quote, that the church suffers because it doesn't heed the indigenous voice. And I think we need to recognize that indigenous culture inherently understands things about God's nature that colonial culture does not understand well. You know, and it goes both ways. There's things in colonial culture that probably has a better perspective on something about creator more so than indigenous culture does. But you know, as Richard says, you know, the church isn't complete until all voices are heard. And so, you know, for the last few hundred years, we've had a megaphone on one cultural voice in the church. And the church has suffered because of that. And I think a lot of the heresies that you see in church history come about because of that silencing of other voices. And that allows people, it gives people more liberty to twist the scriptures to fit what they want to do, rather than allowing the scriptures to influence how they think and do. And, you know, and I'll also say, like, for my own life, like, it's been a long, hard journey for myself. Like, there's a lot of these things that I talked about today that I was like, man, I don't want to do that. Like, and if you would have known me 20, 30 years ago, you would have been like, man, he's really blowing it in that category, you know? So, you know, and I think, and there's a lot of growth to go, you know. 20 years from now, I'm going to look back where I'm at now and be like, oh man, I can't believe that I did that way. but hopefully we're always learning and we're always growing and we're moving into deeper and deeper relationship with Creator and with each other, and that we're getting more and more open to hearing from each other, rather than just kind of having this isolated spiritual experience between me and God. Understand that our relationship with God is reflected in our relationship with everybody else as well. God's way too big to just be me and him. Like, I'm not going to be able to see everything I need to see about God if I'm just looking at me and God. I need to be able to see God in Namar. I need to be able to see God in Leah. I need to be able to see God in Casey, God in Heather, God in Karen, God in the other Karen, God in Kimberly, God in Preston, God in Heather, God in all the people on the Facebook list whose names I can't see right now. Like, I need to see how God impacts that person's life, because that's going to tell me something about God that I would never discover on my own. So again, that emphasis on relationships, and God is all about relationships. There's like that in the big Jesus movement in the 70s. I'm not about God, I'm about Jesus. I mean, I'm not about the church. I'm about relationship with Jesus, and that was really kind of the foundation of evangelicalism, was that idea. And they've kind of lost their first love, so to speak. Like they've moved far away from that ideal. And I think, again, that's because they were only listening to one perspective and they weren't open to hearing other perspectives. But that's like a whole nother long talk I could go on. So I'll just leave that there. Anything from the Facebook land there?
Brian Grover, you know what I got out of your sermon?
Oh, what did you get out of
your talk. Well, it reminded me about how a number of years ago here in the co-op where we live in Albuquerque, there was a big cataclysm on someone on the leadership board, the founding members. Serious stuff happened, and the ministry where we had come from in Chicago for 25 years, we would have community meetings and talk about it to hear everyone's perspectives. It was a traumatic thing, and I was suggesting this and explaining why I thought it was a good idea, and everyone was like, no, we can't do that, and I really tried to explain it, but they were like, no, we can't do that, we're done. And so I came back and I was just really dejected, and I was telling Brian, they can't, they don't want to have healing, this is unhealthy, and I felt like it was this wound they weren't going to clean out, and they were just slapping a Band-Aid on it. And do you remember what you told me?
I would have to guess. I could guess at what I might have said, but you probably know a lot better than I do. So
I don't know if has anyone ever read this book?
Boundaries. It's all about. It's a really good book. It's basically just about how we need to take care of our own backyards and not be trying to fix everyone else's backyard. Oh, you need to have healing at this same rate I've experienced healing, and in this same timeline or whatever. So I had to learn an important lesson then, and that reminded me of some of the first few points on your Sermon of the Mount distillation page, like working through disagreements in an honorable way, walk in a way that brings cleansing and healing, be respectful in your relationships, be a bringer of peace, work through conflicts and dignity. Basically, it's just a patience issue. Everyone's got their different timeline. And there are different ways of healing. Like, healing is not the same for every person. And just because God brought me to healing in a specific circumstance in one way, that doesn't mean that somebody else who might be going through a similar experience is going to experience healing in the same way. Now, they might, and I think it's good for me to be open with them and say, hey, this is my experience. This is how I found healing. But if they say to me, man, I just can't do that right now, I have to respect that. Like, okay. That's okay. God, as long as you're honestly seeking after God's heart, I'm not going to try to force you into the way I experience healing. I'll let healing come between you and God in the way that God feels like is the best way in the best time.
Great book. Boundaries. It helped me a lot.
All right. Yeah, is that even from the Jesus movement? Or
That
is
might
it-
be the 90s or something.
It's a little
Cloud
bit-
and
it's a little bit
Townsend. I
later.
think Heather and I have talked about it a little bit, but
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other comments, questions, observations? You just haven't got to say anything yet tonight, and you just want to hear your voice. That's fine.
I was struck by the native understanding of the sacredness of life, because that's one of the really big things in my heart, is standing for the innocent and standing for those who have no choice of their own self-preservation, and how we as followers of Christ need to be the ones that stand for the innocent. I remember, maybe you can remember the wording to this, Casey. In the Old Testament, there's a scripture that said, if we stand by and watch the innocent go to slaughter, then God can hold us responsible for that if we had an opportunity to help. And so standing for the Right to Life movement is really important to me. And when I saw that brought out in the Sermon on the Mount, and I loved that presentation of it, by the way, that just reminded me how we have got to stand for the sacredness of life, because it's God-given and it's His to give and it's His to take away. So that's what I got out of that first part of it. But that was a good presentation, I thought, of the scripture.
Yeah, and that's so true. I mean, that's a voice that cannot speak for itself. But that also gets back to being a bringer of peace and walking through conflicts and dignity. Because there's a lot of other factors that may have led the person to be in that position where they're even thinking about that kind of choice. Yes, it's important to stand for the voice of the unborn and the unheard. But then we also have to look at wow, how did that person even get to a point where they're even thinking about that to begin with? So there, any issue you have, there's always, hundreds of other issues connected to it. And it can be a challenge to discern, what part of this is best for me to put my time and effort towards. So I think, and I think that's important. Like if you feel a calling in your heart from God, okay, this is the part of this multifaceted, complex, complicated problem that God has given me a burden for. So that's the part of it I'm going to focus on. And I think that's wise. Yeah.
Yeah, there's many organizations in the last 20 years and probably a lot more, who now have gone into what you said, the fullness of the other side of it, to where advocacy is there and available to help the person going through maybe situations that may seem really unbearable to them. And so there are organizations like CareNet and many, many things that I think we need to be familiar with so that we can help. I know one of my neighbors had real difficult parents, and she ended up on the street for years. She was raped and was so naive when she was that young. She didn't even understand what had really happened. But as it turned out, even in her situation for a while as a homeless person, God met her at an early stage, and her daughter, that she never thought of eliminating the daughter, even though her life was really hard. And that daughter today is absolutely her lifesaver. And I think of people like James Robinson and stuff. So I think we do need to advocate for the women that are in difficult circumstances. It's like that old saying, don't curse the darkness, but light a candle.
Sure. Yeah. And, the best way to prevent abortion is to have a society where people don't end up in unwanted pregnancies. And sure, that's a little utopian and a little idealistic, but I think it's, if you're really looking about how do we save the lives of unborn children, we make a society to where every unborn child is wanted and cherished. There's there's lots of different ways to approach things, and we could go on about that for a whole nother long talk. But all right, I think the other Karen has something to say.
Sure. Thanks, Brian, for sharing. That was really deep and powerful, and lots to chew on. The Sermon on the Mount is always that, the talk on the mountainside. And I thank you for bringing in like Randy and Terry and some of the ones who are challenging us to look at things differently. Shalom, the book Randy wrote, and his new book, Decolonizing Evangelicalism, are pretty powerful reads. And I guess one of the things I was thinking of as you were sharing was the whole idea of possessions and how we see economics. And so you can see deep things in how you were sharing that just the opposites of how do we fix even a depressed society? You know, a Western worldview is we do consumerism and we buy, and so that we can stimulate an economy. And so we like, these are really deep into our psyche of how we're going to fix that instead of sharing so that everybody has food. And some of them are pretty foundational, and Jesus took us on for those in deep ways. And so I just shared with that on my sermon on Sunday, because I'm using the First Nations version, but going through the book of Mark. And yeah, like almost Jesus went to the cross because he had a different view of possessions than the world. And, you know, that's really deep and powerful. And so I just really thank you for bringing that up again, that when we counter the culture we're in, people don't usually pat us on the back and say, way to go, this is great thought. They usually crucify us. So it's an interesting thing that as we walk this road, it's not always easy road to walk, but Jesus definitely told us that it will set us free. So thanks for sharing. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and Randy actually has another book that's coming out called Indigenous Theology in the Western Worldview, a Decolonized Approach to Christian Doctrine. It's actually already written and already at the publisher, but for whatever reason, it's not coming out for another year. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that when it comes out, because yeah, it's a lot about what we were talking about today. And really, you know, Richard Twiss's Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys breaks it down. He's more like, people more know his One Tribe, Many Nations. But he really gets a lot more in depth with it in Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys. So if what we talked about here intrigues you and you're not quite sure what to think about it, or you just want to dig deeper into it, I would definitely recommend both of Richard's books, One Tribe, Many Nations, and Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys. And both of well, Randy has a lot more books than just the two, but the Shalom and the Community of Creation and Decolonizing Evangelicalism are both really good ones to look at for that. And I definitely learned a lot from those as well. All right.
Brian, is that One Tribe, Many Nations, or is that One Church, Many Tribes?
Oh, you may be right.
One church, many tribes.
Yeah, I was just kind of, I was off the top of my head, and I got it all twisted around. All right, did you have something to toss in here, Preston?
Yeah, for me, it was just more interesting, like how you got into like really deep logistical side. But for me, I would take it to the artistical side, because lately I've been taking walking, hiking into nature. Made me understand like the deeper into of the Sermon on the Mount, and having to understand all that made me understand that Jesus had to have an operatic voice for that his voice to carry out to everyone. He had to have that notation of working his tongue in different ways to carry his overtones to people to show that he can soothe everyone peacefully and be calm. And when he does that, it the overtones will carry out to everyone where it's like keeping the baby calm itself so that they can stay asleep while he's speaking. And it's so interesting when for that to come up in these times. It's like that takes years and years of practice, and that takes long because as a dancer, like you mentioned last week, I also know from singing for myself as a performing artist that takes years, and I can do a little bit, but and he understood both colonialism and indigenous thought mind, which is like one of the things I've been struggling with at the same time. But during this current process, it's like of being in COVID, it really helped me understand how to be proud of being both and having the integrity and the knowledge of understanding both. And just because having a musical background leaves me have that time and management and making me grow into something and making me want to be having that step process. But at the same time, me being here on the reservation made me have like that cycle process and have me understand, okay, I'm gonna watch the sunset. Let's go drive out. It's gonna happen in 2 hours. We're gonna do this. We know when it's gonna happen. We know when we want to experience it with Christ. And that's what I love, being able to do that now. And you helping me understand how to bring back the logistical side of colonialism, but also keeping me understanding how to keep indigenous, but also making it more known for everyone to understand why we need to serve the people, but we do it with gentle manner and gentle grace. We listen so that they can be gentle with us. It's just food for thought.
We ask someone.
Yeah, I think that's how do you walk in both worlds in a healthy way? Yeah, it's like, and it's good to know that Jesus did it. Like, he left his heavenly realms and came and walked on the earth. So he gets that cross-cultural limbo that multicultural people find themselves in. So yeah, like you said, it's good to know that he's been there. He's been there first. And yeah, there's a lot of power in that too. Like, you have a perspective that I will never have. And you see how things fit together in ways that are totally blind to me, just because I'm only seeing it from one perspective. And I can listen and I can try to learn, but I'm still still limited. So yeah, that's a cool thing, powerful thing.
Brian, I'm wondering if there's anyone who has not had a chance to speak yet that wanted to put something in. Sue Martell said an interesting thing. She said that she used to work in the abortion industry and then in pro-life places after that, and many or most of the girls would say, he said he would leave me if I wouldn't get an abortion. So that was an interesting thing that she observed working there. And then Jeanette Delman is wondering, which were the books referred to in tonight's session? Let's see, I mentioned Boundaries, and then you said Randy Woodley's Indigenous Theology and the Western Worldview. Were there other books?
So the quotes from Randy Woodley that I used are drawn from his Shalom in the Community of Creation, but it's actually from a Sojourners article. So you can go to the Sojourners website. I think it's just sojourners.net. And if you search for Randy Woodley, his article, In the Fullness Thereof, should come up. And so the things I quoted from Randy tonight were directly taken from that article. And then the things I quoted from Richard Twist came from his first book. What's the right way to say that again?
One Church, Many Tribes.
One Church, Many Tribes, yeah. So the Twist things were taken from One Church, Many Tribes. But yeah, I would also really suggest Rescuing the Gospel from the Cowboys. He goes way more in depth in that one. And you can find the Randy Woodley one on the Sojourners website. In the Fullness Thereof was the name of that article. right. Well, it looks like it's staying in our corner here. So we can move on to another song.
And a quick
Oh, we got another quick one?
comment was that, or rather an announcement was that next Monday will be the Native Passover, and so if you scroll down on the Good Medicine Way page, you'll see the list of all the elements to get, like your fry bread or tortillas if you can't do fry bread, green chili, blue mush, so on and so forth. So it's all there, and then we'll be observing that this time 1 week from now.
Wow, already. Okay, so yeah, we'll move into doing this song. But if something comes to mind while we're doing the song, you can feel free to toss it in afterwards. And if there aren't any more comments, we'll do this closing song, and then Heather Jim will send us out. So we're gonna do the friendship dance song. All right. So, Heather Jim, you got a send off for us?
Whoops. There it goes. I thought I stopped my video for a minute there. I was just thinking about what you said earlier, and just thinking about reflecting about International Women's Month, and just understanding like just how much women do contribute to society, and in this world of colonialism, how that it doesn't see women as equal. I think that's pretty safe to say. Just how women are treated in this country particularly, and all around the world. So yeah, just want to mention that and honor that with the women that are here and the women that are not here. And so this is the prayer for tonight. Dear Creator, thank you for all of the wise words that we heard here in this circle. I thank you that we are able to meet here, and that Preston and I are able just to get a decent amount of data just to be online with you guys. We're thankful for that every week. And yeah, just pray for goodness and blessings over everyone this week, and everyone out there in the internet world, because it is what you choose to be. You can choose Jesus, or you can choose the world. So I just pray that everyone continues and opens and honestly continues to choose Creator Sets Free, Jesus. So I pray these in your Son's name, who is Creator Sets Free, who does set us free, and that he is able to take care of us. I thank you for that. So yeah, in his name I pray, amen. Thank you for joining us tonight, guys. That was a really great talk from Brian, supporting women supporting International Women. And yeah, it's a voice that needs to be heard too. Like all of our voices need to be heard. And I'm thanking everyone for allowing that to happen here too. So thank you for all your voices tonight. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. See you next week for a native Passover.
We love you.